Hi, good afternoon. As promised, we're delighted to be joined by Ms. Asako Okai, the Director of UNDP's Crisis Bureau, Ursula Mueller, the Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator of the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and Mourad Wahba, the Director of UNDP's Regional Bureau for Arab States. I think the three of you have just been to Libya, so you're here to brief us, and I will give the floor to Ms. Okai, please. It'll go on by itself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to open this briefing on the UNDP's OCHA's joint mission to Libya last week. Ms. Mueller and Mr. Wahba on my right, and I decided to join efforts to demonstrate our commitment to strengthen our support to a country facing a complex, protracted crisis. The timing of the mission coincided with the return of the UN in Libya after the lifting of the evacuation a few months ago. The UN is in the process of building our presence back in Tripoli, and we intend to expand our physical presence beyond Tripoli in order to be as close as possible to the people we serve. The objectives of our joint visit to Libya were to reiterate support from the global level to the important humanitarian and development work being undertaken in Libya, and also to highlight the humanitarian developmental needs of the people in Libya. We had meetings with high-level government officials, including with the Prime Minister, and we witnessed the rehabilitation work undertaking through the stabilization facility for Libya at the school or in a region with high population growth because of migration. We also went to IDP camp and detention center, as well as a recently opened gathering and departure center for refugees. And also, we visited a main public hospital in Tripoli, where they lack provisions of critical drugs, equipment, and even basic items like gloves. We also attended the inauguration of three recently rehabilitated police training facilities in Tripoli, supported by the United Nations, and we engaged with international partners. It was my first visit to Libya, and allow me to share some of my impressions of country, which has a full potential, but in a very distressing situation. What struck me is how fragile and vulnerable that the country can become while having a wealth from the oil revenue. I heard that the revenue is equal to that of Kuwait. And I saw a strong interdependency between the political, financial, and governance and security factors contributing to the complex, protracted nature of the crisis. The state of public institutions, including of those delivering basic services, is startling, contributing to the aggravation of the humanitarian situation. This interconnectedness of factors highlight the need to work in a much more integrated way with national and international partners. To achieve better results, we need more adaptive tools and collaborative working culture in the best interest of the people of Libya. Better resilience can only be achieved if humanitarian development and peace efforts are undertaking in parallel. I believe there is a momentum for the United Nations to strengthen its support to national institutions. At the central level, UNDP will keep supporting the government on core government functions, and I see public financial management as a critical one among others. At the municipal level, we will keep collaborating with local authorities on social service delivery in order to better serve the people of Libya and address the recurring humanitarian needs. We, as UN partners, want to ensure that collective effort reduce the underlying risk and vulnerability facing the affected population. Addressing the challenges facing Libya requires an urgent and coordinated response from all national and international partners, and we are committed to working in stronger partnership with each other. With the EU and the World Bank, we are aiming for a close collaboration on economic reform, stabilization, and reconstruction. Thank you for your attention, and I'm handing over the floor to my colleague, Ms. Ursula Mueller, who is on my right. Thank you.
Thank you, Asako, and thank you to the members of the media for your interest in the situation in Libya. It is a pleasure to speak with you here today following our joint mission. You have already heard from Asako why we felt a joint mission was important at this time. We cannot overstate that the way forward in Libya requires joined-up humanitarian and development action to which we are fully committed. We need to provide immediate humanitarian support to vulnerable people in Libya and to the affected communities. And we need to prevent new humanitarian needs and to address the structural and economic challenges across the country. I will provide some points on the protracted humanitarian and protection crisis, which is driven by a combination of instability and insecurity, the breakdown in public service delivery, and a governance challenge. An estimated 823,000 people, including some 241,000 children, need humanitarian assistance in Libya. Half of those in need are Libyans, and half are asylum seekers, refugees, and migrants. We visited the Falah makeshift camp for internally displaced people in the outskirts of Tripoli. While there, I was struck by the deplorable conditions that the people have been living in for the past 7 years. We saw over 100 girls and boys and men and women living in overcrowded containers, and there was little, if any, privacy. Blankets hung from the ceiling as makeshift doors. We know that men, women, boys, and girls are affected by crises in a different way. This also means that they require responses that are tailor-made to best meet their specific needs. The deplorable living conditions of displaced people in Falah and elsewhere in Libya is of an urgent concern. These people need critical humanitarian assistance, including protection, psychosocial support, and improved shelter, water, and sanitation, ahead of more durable solutions. Of course, they have the right to return to the places from which they were displaced, but they should be able to do so in a sustainable manner, voluntarily, and to conditions of safety and dignity, and with full knowledge of the circumstances in which they may return to. And all this requires a joined-up approach towards and between all stakeholders. We also visited the Tariq al-Sekha detention center, which has hundreds of migrants from several African countries. At the center, I saw the terrible standards, the lack of basic services, and the hardship the detainees face in their daily struggle to survive. Many have endured unspeakable experiences along the way and deserve the basic rights a human being must have. And this was most evident with the women who have faced atrocities. While there are needs across the country, vulnerability is highest in the south. The situation in the south is complex. A failure to address the needs of the populations in the south would only lead to further destabilization of the entire country. The influx of migrants and refugees is burdening already overstretched basic services and infrastructure. And there are few doctors and teachers with even fewer supplies. In some places, electricity cuts now last up to 14 hours a day. Attacks against civilians and civilian facilities have continued in the south. This is a violation of international humanitarian law, and we call on Libyan authorities to promptly restore calm and law and order and to allow humanitarian partners the security and access required to provide immediate assistance. The good news is that since February, we have been able to scale up the humanitarian response in Libya. Essential humanitarian support is reaching more communities. We stand ready to scale up even more across the country, but we need more access, especially in the south. We have discussed the need for unfettered access for the United Nations and humanitarian partners with senior government officials. Armed groups must also facilitate humanitarian assistance and access. We also urgently need more donor funding. Libya's humanitarian response plan for 2018 is one of the lowest funded in the world at just 25%. The people of Libya need our support. We are clear on what is needed, and we are now better placed to provide it. I'll now hand over the floor to my colleague, Mr. Wahba, who will speak more on approaches to move Libya from crisis to recovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Ursula, and thank you, Stefan, for having us over. And ladies and gentlemen of the press, it was about 2 years ago, and I think practically to the day, that there was a press conference here when we discussed the 4 famines, what was known as the 4 famines, including the one in Somalia, and the appeal from the Secretary General at the time was to have much more joined-up work between the humanitarian and the development sides of the House. I think more perhaps than Somalia, Libya presents its own challenges, requiring the UN to come together in supporting a solution to the issues in Libya today. Because there are political and security issues, and Ms. Mueller has been very clear about those, but there are also humanitarian needs that are very severe, and both development, but mainly sort of infrastructural development issues, institution building issues, that can all contribute, if they work together well, towards a much more hopeful approach to this crisis. And I think that's why we all went to Libya at this particular time. After the events of the summer and the disruptions, if you like, in the summer and the lack of security, the UN has returned in large numbers to Tripoli and is expanding its presence beyond Tripoli to the east of the country, to the south. And we're looking forward really to much more joined-up work of the United Nations in order to improve our efficiency. And this is not just, I mean, we're here as humanitarian and development colleagues, but I think this collaboration that we all seek is also necessary between, say, the humanitarian development side of the House and the UNSMIL side of the House. Really, truly a joined-up approach. So with that in mind, we went to Libya to see, first of all, to see for ourselves so we can have first-hand analysis of the situation, but also to meet with members of the government of national accord in Libya, to meet with our colleagues in the agencies, funds and programs, and in UNSMIL, and to see how we could advance this joined-up work. One, perhaps, common thread there is to enable authorities in Libya to respond to the needs of their constituents, both their humanitarian needs and their development security needs. And to do so, we've been working together on issues of displacement, and we look forward really to enhancing our work with our humanitarian colleagues on issues of displacement, of institution building, specifically with UNSMIL colleagues. We're supporting municipal government and the capacity of locally elected constituencies to promote stabilization in their areas, and this is throughout the country, in, say, Benghazi, in Sirte, in Derna, but in Tripoli also, in the south, in Sebha, etc. And also to encourage the people to see that with stability comes sort of development. We had many discussions with members of government. We've worked with the electoral authorities. We also witnessed, which was very encouraging, I think, the inauguration of police training facilities in Tripoli to help ensure that security, which really is at the basis of any progress in Libya. Perhaps I'd like to conclude, if I may, Stefan, with an expression which the SRSG used with us, and which I think summarizes the whole situation there, which is that Libya has the income of Kuwait and the problems of Somalia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take some questions. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you all for this informative briefing. As you undertook a joint mission, my question is addressed to any one of you. I'm interested particularly about the humanitarian issue as it concerns the migrants who have been returning from the Mediterranean. I read that they were thrown into camps that are really more than camps. They look like prisons where they are deprived of the basic necessities, where they undergo violence, where they are tortured. My question is, have you visited any camp regarding the migrants returning from the Mediterranean? And my second question is, you outlined some measures to relieve the humanitarian situation. What is UNDP doing or is prepared to do to alleviate the situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abado, for your question. We have been able to visit the Tariq al-Seka detention center outside Tripoli. We have seen the unspeakable conditions. Several hundred people were in. There is a need of basic human dignity. They are deprived of basic services. Some of them have been there for 8 months, 1 year. We were given the opportunity by the authorities to meet with the people, to listen to their stories. Some had come from Eritrea, via Yemen, via Sudan. Then they were intercepted at the Mediterranean and kept in this detention center. United Nations agencies have access, are working with them to identify these people. And we were also able to see a newly established greeting and departure center that is jointly run by UN agency and the Ministry of Interior, where those people that have been identified and for whom solutions have been found, either to repatriate them or to find some place in a third country where they are being prepared for their onward travel or their return home. So we, as humanitarians, do what we can, and we have raised this with the Libyan authorities that migrants or refugees or asylum seekers have a right to a decent, a safe and dignified place to stay, or to enable solutions for their return home or to a third country.
Stefano.
Actually, if I may, that to Mr. Ahmed, there are about 5,000 people in detention centres, and we visited one of the larger ones, and the conditions are just as Ms. Mueller described, really inhumane. I mean, crowding, disease, reports of tuberculosis, I was going to say inadequate medical attention, no medical attention, really, really very severe issues. I think there's also a major protection crisis there in Libya. Outside the camps, there are also the detention centers, sorry, we can call them. There are about 60,000 persons. And again, they are also in need of protection. So I think just to go beyond the immediate issue of detention centers, I think, yes, they are in need of protection. Yes, they are in need of support. But the people outside, the migrants who are outside the centers, living out in the open, are also in need of support and in need of protection.
Thank you. Stefano?
As a follow-up on this issue, the irony is this week at the United Nations, we had the Secretary General's speech on the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then we have the vote on Global Compact 2 days ago on the refugee and today on the migrants. Now, my question is, what you said, the terrible things that you said about what's happening to these migrants, is not new. In the sense we heard this in this room and other rooms for several years now. There is a difference now, is that before, some of those migrants were able to arrive to destination where they wanted to arrive. Now, almost now is practically, that it's impossible to pass because Europe, Italy, and other countries struck a deal with Libya. They even given the ship and the training to stop. Without this, because it's not been said that. Well, the question is, who is responsible for abuse of human rights? Only the Libyans and the lager and whoever is torturing these migrants? And the question is, are these still migrants or are refugees now? Their status. So I'm asking you, what is their status? And also, who is responsible? Only the Libyans? The Libyan authority? Or there is somebody else?
One thing is clear, whatever the status of those people is, we appeal to all parties concerned to uphold humanitarian law, human rights law. The fact that UN agencies and also international NGOs can work in these detention centers to establish the identity of those people, they don't come with documents. And we also heard the stories of the traffickers. Some of them are detained traffickers. It was very obvious. So we as humanitarians are there to help the people in need. They need protection and they need a solution. So I was encouraged to see that there is cooperation with the Libyan authorities on identifying these people. We raised the conditions that are not acceptable in these centers, and we find solutions for those who have been identified and their status has been verified with UN agencies to find placements or return them home. For instance, on the 6th of December, 133 people of this detention center were returned either to their home country or to third countries where the international community found agreements with host countries.
In 2 words, the international law is respected in this moment in Libya? And if it's not, by whom is not respected? Only by the Libyan government, or also by other governments that have agreements with the Libya to not let the migrants that becomes refugee to pass? This is you are there to assess, and you will do a report. But are you going to write in your report that there is somebody or some entity, some governments not respecting international law?
We have seen the situation in Libya, and the Secretary General is very clear in his appeals to all parties, all countries, to respect international humanitarian law and international human rights law.
Thank you very much. And then we have to give the floor to Monica. One last brief question. Go ahead, Mr. Abadi. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stefan. You linked the humanitarian situation correctly to the security situation in Libya. The international community is facing both at the same time. Have you met with the officials of the Libyan government? Have you discussed with them, have they discussed with you the role of regional states in the resolution of the Libyan problems? The Maghreb states, for example, through the Skhirat meeting.
No, they didn't. We are well aware of, as you can imagine, of the role of regional powers, but also external powers in the case of Libya. And while we didn't discuss that with the government directly, we are well aware of it, yes.
Thank you. And we'll let Monica brief the press. So thank you very much to our guests. Thank you.